18 days. That is the gap between the speech and the photograph. Count them. And then ask yourself what a gap that genuinely reflected the principle announced in Geneva might have looked like, and whether 18 days is it. On one side, Meghan at the World Health Organization in Geneva, standing beside the Director General, warning a room full of global health officials that children are being quietly turned into content by relentless algorithms built to feed on their attention, shaped by systems designed to maximize engagement at the expense of everything else. The right stage, the right message, the right room, the right cause, all of it correct. On the other side, 18 days later, Meghan's Instagram, her youngest daughter's 5th birthday, 2 new photographs posted to 5 million followers on the very platform she had just described as dangerous. Comments switched off so nobody could answer back underneath the post. A prepared statement already in Newsweek the day before the photographs went live.
Shameless grifters! This is a new low. Harry and Meghan have been blasted for their wild hypocrisy in doing speeches around the world about the dangers of the internet and social media, particularly regarding children, while splashing photographs of Archie and Lily all over social media.
Tonight we are going through the 18 days in detail, the Geneva speech and what it actually said, the prepared defense that landed before the photographs, the single factual detail that breaks the defense when you place 2 newspaper descriptions of the same image side by side, and the contrast that arrived on the same Thursday afternoon that nobody in Montecito arranged or controlled. Let's start with what she actually said in Geneva, because the words matter and it is worth being specific about them. This was World Health Assembly Week, the week when health ministers from every WHO member nation convene in one place to address the most pressing global health questions. The backdrop for Meghan's appearance was a memorial installation of 50 illuminated light boxes, each representing a child harmed by life online. That was not a soft photo call or a celebrity appearance to generate awareness about a vague and uncontested cause. That was a serious public health stage, with serious attendees, operating on a serious mandate, and she was the face of it, the person the Director General stood beside for the cameras.
This is totally bonkers. Meghan Markle has decided to use the 5th birthday of her own daughter to lash out while claiming to be the hero for protecting children from social media. We see you, Meghan, and your angry statement ain't going to shut us up.
She spoke about relentless algorithms and exploitative engagement. She warned about children being exposed to content they never went looking for and never consented to seeing, shaped by systems they cannot understand and cannot fully opt out of. She said children must be safe by design, not by chance, meaning the responsibility sits with the platforms and the companies that build them, not only with individual parents trying to navigate a system that was specifically designed to maximize engagement above every other consideration. That is the correct and well-documented critique of the social media ecosystem, supported by substantial research and advanced by serious researchers as well as celebrity advocates.
Children are no longer just participants in digital spaces. They are too often the product. They didn't know that the platforms valued profit over people. We would never accept a food system that knowingly exposed children to harm.
But Meghan Markle, are you seriously saying, despite that rhetoric, that your 5-year-old daughter is giving you permission to share her image for money? Yeah, I think there's nothing wrong with parents sharing their children online. But remember, Prince Harry has called it evil. He has attacked parents who are doing exactly what you would do.
She said all of this standing next to the Director General of the WHO, in front of a room that had both the authority and the mandate to do something about it. They were the correct words. The cause is real. The danger she was describing is documented and well evidenced. The maddening thing about what followed is not that she was wrong in Geneva. She was not. The maddening thing is that being right about a danger is only useful if the person describing the danger demonstrates some relationship to the principle in their own life. The moment they do not, every sentence they spoke gets quietly cheapened. The parents who needed to hear the warning start to consider the messenger rather than the message.
Also said she wasn't going to serve her children to the media on a silver platter, specifically Archie. But now we have her serving her children on a silver platter to the same social media companies that she goes around campaigning against for, I guess, that dopamine hit. I am also imagine she is paid per post as an Instagram influencer. I do believe she's probably in that program, so that would be an incentive for her.
The cause gets entangled with the contradiction. The person most damaged by the 18 days is not Meghan. It is the cause she was representing in Geneva. Every parent who needed to hear that warning clearly, without the noise of a spokesperson-managed contradiction arriving 3 weeks later, is slightly less able to hear it now. The message was correct. The messenger made it harder to receive, which is precisely why the 18 days matter. Not because she had to live perfectly, but because the gap between the speech and the photograph is specific, documented, counted, and 18 days long. If Palace Insider is giving you the full picture that other channels skip, hit the like button. It costs nothing, and it keeps us going. Now let's talk about what happened when the birthday photo landed, because the response is what turned a birthday post into a proper story.
Problem that I have, particularly with this now, or not my personal problem, but why I just think it's incredibly unwise of this couple to do this, is that increasingly at the center of this commercial operation is Lilibet. She is increasingly the cheese, the bait, the whatever you want to call it, to draw people into these photographs.
She did not go to ground and let the criticism blow over. She did not post a quiet follow-up that sidesteps the question. She did the opposite, and she did it in a very specific way. Her camp came out swinging. The day before the photograph was even posted, the day before the camera shutter clicked, a spokesperson for the Duchess went to Newsweek with a prepared statement. The statement drew a firm line in the sand. There is, it said, a distinction between sharing moments from her life and exposing her children to public scrutiny. By keeping the faces back, the argument ran, she is doing exactly what she preached in Geneva. The children are protected. The principle is intact. Read that positioning carefully and give it the credit it deserves before we take it apart, because it is genuinely clever footwork, and it would be a mistake to dismiss it as simple cynicism. The claim is not that she changed her mind after Geneva, or that she had not fully thought through the implications of the speech when she was giving it. The claim is that the photograph and the Geneva speech are the same act. She is not retreating from the WHO stage, she is folding the birthday post directly into the speech and arguing that the two things are one coherent and consistent position on child protection. Controlled disclosure as opposed to total absence. Intentional framing as opposed to algorithmic exposure. The parent in charge of the image, not the platform. That is the move the royal watchers found fascinating, and it is worth noting that Harry is not absent from this specific dimension of the story. Harry went on record on the Hassan Minhaj podcast in 2025 describing major social media platforms as evil and wicked. His wife posted their daughter to one of those platforms 18 days after a speech condemning what those platforms do to children. The household's stated public position on social media and the household's actual use of social media for commercial and brand purposes sit in their own specific tension, separate from the Geneva speech, but running exactly parallel to it. Two people whose public statements describe social media as dangerous, posting to social media at a rate determined by brand strategy rather than personal necessity. The statement was drafted, approved, and placed with a journalist the day before the photograph. That is not a response to criticism after the fact. That is a prepared defense launched before the criticism had a chance to form. She knew exactly how this would read. She had the answer ready. And she pressed publish anyway with that answer already in the public domain. That is not someone who stumbled into a contradiction. That is someone who weighed it and chose to proceed regardless. Tom Sykes, who was actually in Switzerland for the Geneva speech and watched it in person, called the birthday photograph staggeringly tone-deaf. Richard Fitzwilliams on GB News said the Sussexes are tireless in self-promotion and described the habit of photographing the children from behind as very curious. That word curious doing a great deal of weight-bearing work in a single sentence, because a woman who genuinely wanted her children digitally invisible has the easiest available tool in the world to make them invisible. She simply does not post them. What she does instead is post them carefully, on a schedule, to her own platform, to 5 million people. That is not absence. That is art direction. Brand commentator Nick Ide told Newsweek the whole sequence simply felt hypocritical and pointed directly at the timing. The Independent's Claire Cohen wrote a broadsheet column arguing that posting your child repeatedly, even with the face kept back, betrays rather than protects privacy. And that piece ran not on a gossip platform, but in a national newspaper on the same day. That is a royal commentator, a brand expert, and a broadsheet columnist on 3 separate platforms, all arriving independently at the same word on the same day, all looking at the same 18 days and reaching the same conclusion about what they communicated. 3 different professional lenses, 3 separate deadlines, 1 word. When 3 people on different platforms reach the same word independently on the same day, each having looked at the same 18 days, the word is not a coincidence. It is a description. Subscribe to Palace Insider and drop your take in the comments. Is the face-back policy a genuine and meaningful protection, or is it the framing that allows the post to happen while providing cover for what the post does? Now let's talk about the detail that the official defense depends on, because this is where the argument breaks down specifically rather than generally. The spokesperson's entire position rests on 1 word: obscured. The faces are kept back. Protection through framing. And plenty of outlets reported it in exactly those terms. Newsweek, the New Zealand Herald, and others all described the birthday image as in keeping with the couple's long-standing policy of not showing the children clearly, as though the policy had been consistently and carefully maintained. Except the Daily Mail, looking at the exact same photograph, described it as the clearest birthday picture Meghan had ever posted of her daughter. Set those 2 descriptions next to each other and hold them there for a moment, because both cannot be true simultaneously, and the defense cannot survive them both being true. The entire defense depends on the face being genuinely, meaningfully, and substantively kept back in a way that makes the image fundamentally different from an identifying photograph. The national newspaper that specifically examined the photograph for that quality said the opposite happened. 1 image, 2 completely contradictory descriptions from 2 sources that both looked at it. And the spokesperson is banking, has to be banking, on most people not placing those 2 descriptions next to each other. Because if they do, the central claim of the defense collapses. Either the image is careful and privacy-preserving in the tradition the statement describes, and the Daily Mail's assessment is wrong. Or the Daily Mail looked at the same photograph and read it accurately as the boldest picture Meghan has posted of her daughter yet, 18 days after a speech about the dangers of exposure. Both things cannot simultaneously be true, and the statement that was placed in Newsweek the day before the photograph very carefully does not acknowledge that anyone drew the second conclusion. There is a real argument on the other side, and it deserves its full hearing before we close it out. Because the defenders are not making an absurd claim. Her supporters put it with force. A single, controlled, once-a-year photograph is not the same animal as the relentless, round-the-clock algorithmic feed she was describing in Geneva. 1 curated birthday picture posted by a mother on her own platform is categorically different from a child handed a device and left to the recommendation engine for 6 hours. By that reading, she is drawing the exact line she described in Switzerland. Sharing the moment while guarding the identity, choosing the post rather than the algorithm, the curated glimpse rather than the endless feed. And one of the child welfare experts who specifically spoke to Newsweek for this story conceded that a face kept back is genuinely safer than a face on full show, and that the distinction matters in practice rather than being a purely cosmetic one. A partially obscured image does less work in facial recognition systems and offers less material for the kind of online targeting behavior that parents of public figures most reasonably fear. The defenders are not wrong to make this argument, and the child welfare expert who made it to Newsweek is not wrong either. The problem is that the Geneva speech was never only about screen time minutes or facial recognition risks. It was about something broader. Children being quietly turned into content. About the systemic, accumulating exposure that happens when a child becomes part of a feed that millions of people scroll through daily, watched by an audience that did not choose to be in that child's life, but is now part of it whether the child knows or not. A photograph posted to 5 million followers on the verified Instagram of a recognized public figure, 18 days after warning the world about exactly that kind of digital presence for children, is still that kind of digital presence. Tidier, more carefully staged, better framed, but still a contribution to exactly the feed she described as dangerous. The defenders have the better intentions. The critics have the calendar. And the calendar says 18 days. There is also a pattern worth looking at honestly. Run an eye across the post's milestone after milestone, and the stated privacy standard has not tightened the way you would expect from a couple growing more protective as their children get older. Archie's 7th birthday, a month before the Lilibet photographs, produced its own publicly posted tribute with no visible attempt at restraint from what a stricter privacy standard might dictate. The stated principle and the actual posting record have been moving in different directions over time. And they have been moving in one direction only, toward more visibility, not less, across years and across multiple children's milestones. Nobody forced that. She chose the platform, chose the moment, and chose exactly how much to put into each frame. The answer, measured across time rather than across one birthday post, has been more. Then there is the thread Tom Sykes pulled hardest, and it is the one that puts everything else in a specific light. Her Instagram, he argued, is a public-facing shop window. The night before the Geneva speech, she posted herself getting ready, captioned "Mama's Little Helper." In the mirror, clearly visible in the shot, was the label of the designer suit she would wear to the WHO summit the next morning. A speech about protecting children from algorithmic exposure was trailed the night before by a wardrobe reveal on Instagram. The Child Safety Summit and the designer label sat in the same news cycle, separated by one night. Her critics cannot get past the sequence, and they are not wrong to find it worth noting. The outfit got its preview. The speech got its platform. The birthday post got its 5 million. The business context matters here as the backdrop, not as proof of motive. The Spotify deal is long gone. The Netflix arrangement has been reshaped from its original scale. The lifestyle brand is still finding its commercial footing. None of that proves anything, and the critics who make this argument acknowledge it. But it is the context through which they now read every family post. And it is the context through which 5 million followers receive those posts, whether they are conscious of it or not. When a brand runs on closeness and access, and the major commercial partnerships that once provided its revenue base have contracted significantly, the family is the remaining asset that no commercial departure can remove. The family connection is the one thing that belongs entirely to the brand and cannot be restructured away. Now let's talk about what happened on the same Thursday afternoon, because this contrast arrived without anyone arranging it, and it landed harder than anything a commentator said. While the birthday photographs were going up on Meghan's Instagram and the conversation about Geneva and 18 days was spreading across commentary circles, Catherine, Princess of Wales, spent her afternoon at a cancer center in Manchester. She stood beside a 30-year-old patient finishing chemotherapy. She watched the woman ring the bell that marks the end of treatment, a moment every cancer center runs and every cancer patient remembers. She spoke quietly about how difficult the whole experience is, not just for the person in treatment, but for the family who have to watch from the edges of someone else's hardest months and have no clear role in what is happening to the person they love. No caption strategy. Nothing trailed the night before. No prepared statement in Newsweek. No comments section managed and then switched off. One royal woman spending a stranger's hardest afternoon at her side, in person, away from her own phone. The people who follow this story notice that difference every single time. They always do. And they do not need a commentary channel or a prepared statement to point it out for them. Here is where everything lands, put as plainly as possible. 18 days after warning the world that children are being turned into content on the very platforms she uses daily, Meghan posted what half the press described as the clearest birthday picture of her daughter yet. Her camp had the defense written and placed with a journalist before the photograph was published. She refused to treat the contradiction as a contradiction. She pressed publish with the answer already in the public record, having weighed the criticism in advance and decided it was worth absorbing. A royal commentator, a brand expert, and a national broadsheet columnist all called it hypocrisy. Her own Geneva words said the exposure was the danger. Tom Sykes called the photograph staggeringly tone-deaf. The Daily Mail said it was the clearest image she had posted. The spokesperson said it was the most careful. Both cannot be right. One of them is describing what the photograph actually was when you look at it with the specific question in mind. The other is describing what the statement needed it to be in order for the defense to hold, which is a different exercise from describing what it is. She did not stumble into this. She lectured publicly on a major international stage in front of officials with the authority and mandate to act. She was challenged before she published, not by critics who would write their pieces afterward, but by her own speech, which was already in the public record, and against which every subsequent post would inevitably be measured. She had the answer ready, signed off, and delivered to a journalist before the photographs went up. And she pressed publish anyway, with her eyes fully open, her defense already publicly loaded in a news outlet, and the 18 days sitting right there on the calendar for anyone who cared to count. That makes this the most calculated moment she has produced this year. The decision with the most advanced preparation, the most preloaded public defense, the most clearly weighed contradiction, presented to 5 million followers as the most natural thing in the world, a mother and her daughter on a birthday. The simplest version of the whole business. She flew to Geneva, warned the planet that children are being turned into content by platforms built to maximize attention, flew home, and within 18 days turned her own child into content on one of those platforms. No apology, just a statement insisting the two things were the same act of love. The 18 days are the answer to that statement. They are the gap between the warning and the action. They are the space in which the principle and the practice diverged visibly enough for a royal commentator, a brand expert, and a broadsheet columnist to all independently land on the same word. There is one last thing worth saying before the outro. The people who push back most forcefully on this kind of analysis argue that holding a celebrity activist to the standard of their public speech is unfair, that no one lives perfectly by the principles they advocate, and that demanding consistency to that degree is a way of silencing advocacy by making it too costly. That is a real argument, and it applies broadly across public life. The problem specific to this situation is the 18 days, not the years of general social media use, not the broader pattern of posts across a career of public advocacy. The 18 days. The speech happened. The photographs happened. They happened close enough together that the date gap is the story. Had the birthday fallen 6 months after Geneva, or 6 months before it, the conversation would look very different. The photographs would simply not be in the same frame as the speech. It is the 18 days specifically, the proximity, the measurable gap between the warning and the action, that makes this more than a general observation about public figures living imperfectly by their stated principles. Almost everyone does that. The 18 days make this particular instance visible, documented, and specific enough to examine. She stood in Geneva and said something specific about a specific danger to the people most positioned to address it at a systemic level. 18 days later, she did something that directly engages that specific danger on the specific platform she had just described as dangerous. The calendar is not an unfair standard to hold her to. It is simply the record of what happened and when. That record does not require interpretation. It just requires reading in sequence and placing both things in the same frame at the same time. What do you think? Does the faceback policy genuinely separate the birthday post from what she described in Geneva? Or do the 18 days tell a different story regardless of framing? Drop your honest take in the comments below. Subscribe to Palace Insider so you never miss what we cover next. And the like button genuinely helps the channel keep doing this kind of analysis. Until the next one.